Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 182, recorded on December 14th, 2011. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Sometimes he forgets. We all have those names.
Not just Al, but Alan today.
The whole group
fancy.
is back. You guys did a wonderful job without me. Riveting entertainment as always. Nothing but positive, glowing comments in our email address. Of course, nothing but. But I'm back in town. Thank you for covering for me while I was in Austin learning about super secret things from AMD, which it turns out you'll be able to learn about. Well, I guess if you read any of the rumor sites or you just wait a little bit longer, you'll hear about all of the goodness that I got to see in Austin, Texas in the not too distant future. First things first, we have 2 voicemails today we're going to get to on the show. I know that's really exciting. One of them came in literally minutes before the podcast was going to be recorded. And that number, again, for you to call if you have a voicemail is 1-888-38-PC-PER, toll-free U.S. and Canada, and podcast at pcper.com. You can send me an email there. Please, if you're the one responsible for sending me emails about caviars, and by caviar I mean actual food, not hard drives, you can stop, because I'm not interested in bulk purchasing caviar from you, nor am I interested in doing any link swap I get on that email address recently. So I blame Josh usually.
Yeah.
So kind of an interesting week, not a huge amount of reviews and news kind of coming out. We're typically in a slow period the month of December because of all the holidays that happen, and most people that have big things they want to announce, they tend to hold them for CES, which will be January, I believe the 9th, starts January the 9th. Out in Las Vegas. So we'll see how that progresses for the rest of the month. I think we have at least 1 or 2 more big product releases from a hardware side of things. Handful of reviews that we posted at pcper.com. One, Matt Smith posted a review of the Dell Inspiron 14Z notebook. This is, let me look at the specs, make sure I get all this right. It is a Core i5 Sandy Bridge system, uses the Intel integrated graphics, no discrete GPU, 6 gigs of memory. It's got a CD-DVD burner, 14.1-inch screen. This is 4.23 pounds. Does have USB 3.0, 2 ports of that, which is kind of nice. And it has a price tag of about $750. It's not a netbook, obviously. It's not an ultrabook, but it did get pretty good response from Matt on this machine, especially if we look at, I want to see the battery life here, because this is what tends to matter the most to me on these types of machines. It did get an editor's choice, one of the few we've given notebooks at pcper.com, so that's definitely worth checking out. Battery life. Oh, here we go. This is why I loved it so much. It apparently goes forever. The over 6.5 hours of continuous read time on the battery, with a 6-cell battery, no less. So it's actually pretty nice. So check that review out. Also, Steve posted a review of the Gigabyte E350N USB 3.0 Fusion Mini ITX motherboard. So this is as the name implies, a mini ITX form factor, 1 single full-length PCI Express by 16 slot, dual DDR3 memory slots. But the important part is this is built on the AMD E350 dual-core Fusion APU. Not a powerhouse by any stretch of the imagination, but better than the Atom processor. I don't know if that's a compliment, really. Right? I don't know. You guys will have to be the judge of that. But
it's kind of amazing to me that these have been out for a year now. It doesn't seem like it's been that long.
Has it really been that long? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they were introduced at CES last year, and we're almost there.
Yeah, you're right. I did see them for the first time at IDF last September. So yeah, and then they were released. Yeah, you're right. It's they've been out for a while. Steve's kind of conclusion, and I do kind of agree with him on this, is that this is a platform that is ready for that performance refresh. It definitely is, but with all the changes going on at AMD and I guess we talked about a few weeks ago, Josh, delays in what was the successor to Zacate?
Krishna?
Yeah, that's kind of been delayed and pushed back a little bit, right?
I think it's actually been canceled. They have had one speed refresh, in between what now and back then when it was released. It's the E450. It goes up 100 megahertz. They have a little bit more aggressive turbo, but it's still a 40 nanometer product. They're hoping to go to this next generation 28 nanometer product that would be either dual core Bobcat or up to 4 cores in a Bobcat. But they designed it around Global Foundries 28 nanometer design rules, and Global Foundries is apparently nowhere near ready to have a 28 nanometer process technology that is ready for actual production. TSMC is churning out 28 nanometer parts, not as many as everybody would like, but they're still doing it. Global Foundries is not. There's enough differences in between. I think it's a gate first, HK metal gate at Global Foundries. It's gate last at TSMC. So, I mean, there's a massive change in the design rules between the two processes. And so, yeah, it looks like Krishna is, and I can't remember what the other
Wichita.
code names they have for it. Wichita, yeah. Those things have been canceled and I think thrown out the door. They're going to try to do a slightly refreshed 40 nanometer part, and we'll see that probably early next year, maybe later in Q1. But yeah, they're well behind of where they were hoping to be, and they're hoping to take some more market share from Intel and some of these other low power guys with a robust x86 solution that was not pulling a whole lot of power and had good graphics and stuff like that. But
It was decent.
yeah,
It's interesting you mentioned Global Foundries here. It's not on our show notes, but I did get a press release just a couple hours ago that I don't think we'd posted anything on yet. And that was Global Foundries and ARM put out a press release that they demonstrated a Cortex A9 processor operating at more than 2.5 gigahertz on 28 nanometer technology, and that they had taped out 20 nanometer qualification vehicle for the A9 as well, Cortex A9 processors. So that's pretty good. That's good news. They've got they did this out of Fab 1 in Dresden.
Everybody's going to the A15 by the middle of next year.
Yes, if that's the case, then it might be too late. But this is, I don't know. Global Foundries definitely needs to get that up and running. We're supposed to meet with a couple of those people out at CES as well, so maybe we'll get some news there. So yeah, check out Steve's review of the E350N if you're interested in that kind of mini ITX form factor. Want to build some kind of super low power, low heat, low power consumption home theater PC, something like that. Also, we posted a quick review of the Antec 1100 case. This is very, very similar to the Antec P280 case that we reviewed 2 or 3 weeks ago, I guess now. The 1100 is based on the same chassis, actually, but it has a couple of key changes. Those key changes include this. Well, the idea is that this case is much more centered around performance rather than being a quiet system. So there are, I think there's 4 or 5 additional places for 120 millimeter fans. There's a window that has on the side door that can have 2 additional fans. There's actually an interesting, if you look at the pictures of the back of the case, you'll see this 120 millimeter fan hole that's actually on the back of the system that points right where the motherboard is. No, go one picture up for me, Burke. It's actually this one that points at the back of the motherboard. It's kind of interesting. So there's the big CPU cutout plate there, and you can mount a fan that goes right there. I don't know how much use do you think that's getting? I mean, it's kind of nice, right? The back of the processor socket does tend to get fairly warm. It's usually completely contained, very static air, no air movement really in those areas. So that's an interesting addition. It does have USB 3.0 on the front. It has fan filters on the bottom, fan filters on the front. It has a 240 millimeter fan up top. It has 2 dedicated 2.5-inch hard drive mounts on it. It has, instead of trays, it actually has, now I can't think of the term all of a sudden, for hard drives, it actually uses rails instead of trays, right? So you put a rail on either side of a hard drive, slide it in. Those are great. They actually work really well, and they're easy to install. They're not compatible with 2.5-inch drives. So if you have more than 2 SSDs, you'll have to get a tray of some kind to use for that. But it's a really nice case. I believe the last time when we published this, I'll check again, the price was about $120 at Newegg, which is really, really nice for the type of case it is. Yeah, $119 still. So
Hey, those 2.5-inch bays on it, are they like? Is there a back plane there? Because it looked like there was nothing really holding the drive on the side. You just basically just slide it in and it plugs right
you
in.
You slide it in, and it's fairly tight with just like a plastic thing. But there's a place for one screw, so you can put a screw in to hold it. But there's no back
Right.
plane for it. You still have to bring your SATA cables in to the back. And that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, they didn't do any kind of swap bays like that. They're trying to keep it a low cost case, I guess, is the reasoning for that. So, pretty nice case.
So it's not a level 10 case, right?
No, it's definitely not. $120, pretty low cost compared to that. If you had to compare, so the 1100 and the P280 are very similar. They're kind of geared at different consumers. I personally would prefer the P280. I like the sound dampening material on the doors and on the top and on the side panel, that type of thing. And I kind of like the trays, because I would be the type of person that would use more SSDs than the average. They might just have one. But if you are more concerned about performance than sound levels, then the 1100 would probably be the best choice for you there. So they're both actually really good cases. You can go check out. If you don't get enough video of Ryan Shrout, you can check out our video reviews of that.
But at least you have
welcome
a nice
to PC
Corsair.
Perspective. I'm Ryan Shrout. In this video, we're going to be looking through. Yeah. That's more of me. You can hear more of me. You can see more of me. Whatever you want to do with your demented selves. Okay, so one other actually review that was posted literally moments before recording the podcast is I finished up a write-up on the Core i7 3930K Sandy Bridge E processor. Now, you might be saying to yourself, but Ryan, where do you know all about Sandy Bridge E? And that's true. We've talked about the architecture. We've talked about the platform. When the reviews actually came out, there are only two parts that were released. The 3960X, which is the $990 Extreme Edition processor. That's the one that the Intel sent us for a review. And then the 3930K, which was just as unlocked as the Extreme Edition part, but was clocked a little bit less and priced significantly less. $555 is the MSRP versus $990. And the clock speed difference is only 100 megahertz at both the base clock and the top turbo boost frequency. So you're talking about a frequency difference of about 2.5%, even though the price difference is like 45%. This doing the math right off the top of your head says, okay, this is actually going to be a better selection part for people who aren't just made of money. This is where if I had thought about it, I would have included the Scrooge McDuck photo that we often use when talking about Intel.
You do also lose 3 megs of cache, but I don't think
true.
that's going to do anything.
You go from 15 to 12 megs of cache. That's correct. I did forget that. The long story short, performance, kind of what you would expect, right? Processors, when the CPU is a bottleneck, you get that 2.5 to maybe 3% performance difference because memory's running at the same speeds. You still got quad channel memory. It's the same Sandy Bridge E platform that I was very impressed with initially, only you're getting just a little bit less performance for $400 less, $440 less out of your wallet, right? So in my opinion, this is the only way to purchase a Sandy Bridge E platform, unless, as I said before, you were just kind of rolling in the dough. $550 is still a lot of money for a processor, no doubt, but it's a lot less money than $990. The problem is, yes, that's a totally accurate depiction of what you have to be to buy an Extreme Edition processor most of the time, carrying bags of money around. So performance per watt. So the power consumption is interesting. It's basically identical, a little bit lower on the idle power consumption and maybe 1 or 2 watts lower on the peak power consumption. And so the performance per watt between these two CPUs is identical, essentially. The better part here, the best discussion is the performance per dollar. It's basically anywhere from 50 to 75% better performance per dollar compared to the Core i7 3960X. So that's great. It still falls well behind the AMD FX 8150 in terms of performance per dollar, and in several cases, the Core i7 2600K, which is the Sandy Bridge processor that we're all most familiar with, right? So if you look at those types of charts, it doesn't take everything into account. It doesn't take the raw performance numbers into account. It's strictly a performance per dollar. So if your biggest concern is performance for the money, that's what you can look at. And if you look at those graphs, the best one in that story is almost always the AMD Phenom 2 X6 1090T, which kind of sticks out there quite a bit, and even the Phenom 2 X4. But those are aging processors. You're going to have difficulty finding them. And the Sandy Bridge E is not a platform for the most cost-conscious people. But even saying that, if you can get about twice, 50 to 75% better value, and still get the same platform advantages, quad channel memory, all those PCI Express lanes for SLI and Crossfire configurations. Those are the types of things I still think, even if you are looking to buy an expensive gaming PC, you're willing to spend $2,000, you can save more than $400. Get an extra GTX 580 for that price. That's going to be well more, I think, worth your investment than getting the 3960X versus the 3930K. Agreed. I mean, it seemed kind of obvious looking at the numbers, but we wanted to run the test. We wanted to put the benchmarks together. We wanted to make these graphs to show readers and listeners and viewers that this is what happens, right? This is why we always try to find that sweet spot. And the truth may lie still in the months to come when the Core i7-3820 comes out, which is the quad-core Sandy Bridge E. We'll see how that really kind of stacks up against the current Sandy Bridge processors in terms of pricing and performance. That's going to be the most interesting, because it will be, is the Core i7 2600K and 2700K Sandy Bridge part going to outperform the Sandy Bridge E part? That'll kind of invalidate the quad channel memory and additional cache and that kind of stuff in terms of real world performance usage. It should be interesting there. Any more thoughts from anybody on this platform or anything like that?
Well, you agree now that the 3930 should be on the Dream leaderboard, or are you still going for the 3960?
For the Dream system, see, it's hard to say. The Dream system in my mind is still stupid people money, right? Stupid amounts of money.
And the link is still there. But if you want stupid amounts of money, then you go with that dual Celeron system that's in there.
Dual Celeron? No, Xeon.
Or sorry, it's dual Xeon. It's only... What did it come up to this
Celeron.
Yeah,
I got
Celeron.
two Celerons, 450
really
megahertz sitting here. Chuck it away. They're overclocked.
Yeah, no thanks on that. So yeah, check out that review. Let me know. Josh, this is kind of what we're used to seeing, right, with Intel processors over the last decade, essentially, is you've got that $1,000 part and you've got that $500-something part. And typically we even have several steppings below that, but in this case we just have these two. It seems obvious that $500 part is going to be more popular, more useful to the mass markets than the $1,000 part.
Yeah, and but the thing we need to remember here is that there's going to be a kind of smash down part below this that's going to be quad core. It's going to have less cache enabled, and I think it's going to be some of these more defective chips and parts that Intel has done. But this is something like a 420 millimeter squared die. Even though Intel is made of money, in fact, their entire building in Santa Clara is just giant stacks of $1 bills.
Yep.
Maybe even hundreds. Anyway, they really can't afford to put out a huge amount of these and kind of throw off a bunch of their other products that will use this fab space. So, I really question how many of these parts we will really see. I mean, sure, they will be on the market. They'll be out there. But I'm curious what the rarity is going to be. And, they're going to perform well. And people are going to want them, and they're going to buy them. But essentially, they're using these high-end Xeon dies that didn't quite make the cut. And they're still going to want to sell these CPUs as the high-end part for even more money. It's what, $2,500 a pop at a lot of these same specifications. In fact, they get an extra two cores enabled in some of these Xeons. But it's going to be interesting to see if this will become the new i7-920, which was, by far the most popular i7 processor for just about 2 years until we got these latest Sandy Bridge parts on the Z68 platform. So it's going to be interesting to see how Intel will utilize these parts, how they're going to offer them, how they're going to market them. And of course, Intel's kind of sitting in the catbird seat because AMD's bulldozer is not what everybody was hoping it would be. They still have not been able to get them out in the kind of numbers that are needed. Today, you look around at Tiger Direct, Newegg, anywhere, you still cannot find the high-end FX processor. They're just sold out. About 2 weeks ago, they were on the market for about 4 days, and then they're sold out again. And, kind of going into a segue there, AMD has totally stopped production of the Phenom 2 X6s. So the 1090T was a popular part. The 1100T was almost as popular. And people who just refused to go with Intel and wanted to have a good performing AMD part went with one of those two processors. They are able to overclock some, good performance overall, good value. And now I think there's like one OEM distributor that has something like 1,000 pieces each, and that's it. They're going to be gone from the marketplace here very, very soon. If you look on eBay, an X6 1090T is selling for $210, and
wow.
I mean they've just dried up. So maybe Intel can get away with charging a lot of these prices, but I think that the marketplace is probably going to eat them up really fast. So supply is going to be limited. So keep an eye out.
Yeah,
Cool.
It's a long way till Pile Driver, isn't it?
It's like 8 months till Pile Driver for the desktop.
And you mentioned the Core i7-920. I wonder if the Core i7-3820 will be that part. That quad core Sandy Bridge E with 40 lanes of PCI Express and quad channel memory controller will be that part. I don't know if it has to be a significantly better performer than the Core i7 like 2600K to get that kind of boost and become that part. I don't know. It still seems kind of limited. A lot of the feedback we had to our Sandy Bridge E review originally was, that's nice and all, but I'm happy with my 1155 Sandy Bridge rig when it came out. When Nehalem came out, people weren't as happy with what was out already. So, will be interesting. Let's see. What are we going to do here? We will take a break, a short one, to thank today's podcast sponsor, and come back with some news and then some voicemails from PC Perspective listeners just like you. All right, thank you for that. Let's talk about some graphics card stuff. Why don't I let you guys talk about some graphics card stuff? Who wants to give me a little bit of detail here on the AMD 7000 series graphics cards? I haven't heard of these things yet. Could someone tell me something about them? Yeah, let me know.
Jeremy, do you want to take this to me? I don't care.
I'll start it off quickly, and you can get in depth. But we've finally pretty much seen actual pictures of not quite reference cards, but engineering samples of both Tahiti and Pitcairn GPUs, what will be the Radeon HD 7000 series. The biggest thing about the pictures that we've seen is confirmation that AMD is, as usual, going the opposite way of NVIDIA and providing more and more bandwidth. They're going with 384-bit memory buses, which could do some very nice things for your overall RAM count on your cards. We've, from the week, seen more or less a rough idea of what prices are going to be at. So for essentially what is going to be the 7950 and the 7970, you're looking at about 400 and 500 a piece. And for the Pitcairns, the slower ones, the 7850 and 7870, looking more towards $200 to $300 a piece. And one of the really fun things about at least the highest end, the 7970, is that AMD has given the resellers the go-ahead to go nuts, to not stick with the reference card designs. So instead of waiting for the cards to mature for a little bit in certain people, or certain manufacturers getting picked and chosen to provide a liquid cooled one and a factory overclocked, something with brand new supercapacitors on it. AMD has said on the top end card, go nuts, see what you can do. And that's going to make life difficult for people like Josh, who are now going to have to review cards, which usually a 6970 was a 6970. Might be a little bit faster, might be a little bit slower. It's really hard to say. One might have an extra fan. These ones from the get-go could be liquid cooled. They could be completely redesigned on the PCB, on the way that the power is handled, have extra PCI Express power coming into it. It's going to make your life a little busy at CES, isn't it, Josh?
It's not going to make my life busy. I've got such a backlog of other crap that I need to do. I had promised a video card review this week. Do you see one? No, because
Nope.
life just gave me the large backhanded slap. And yeah, that's my excuse. I'm going to go with it. I lost all my hair. My nose isn't growing. But anyway, yeah, it's nice that AMD is going to be giving these guys a little bit of leeway. And that means that the designs are somewhat well known already, because what usually happens is that AMD or NVIDIA, they get a group of new cards out, and what they do is they contract with a single manufacturer. They do a couple of runs of thousands and thousands of reference design cards with reference cooling, and then they send them to the partners, and the partners then put a sticker on it and sell it as their own, and hence the sticker versions of the different products, like the GTX 480. Except for like one product out there from MSI, they were all reference products based on NVIDIA designs, and actually contracted by NVIDIA to this one or two manufacturers. It's going to be nice that AMD is going to give a little bit of leeway there. It's going to be a more exciting launch. Excuse me. There's going to be more products out there that'll be non-reference. Of course, it doesn't sound like there's going to be really a single reference design, except for maybe some of the smaller guys. But Asus, MSI, HIS, maybe Galaxy, some of these other guys are going to have their own products out there. But a couple other things we learned about the 7000 series is a little bit of confirmation of what we've been talking about earlier. The top 7900 series are going to be the GCN. That's going to have the more graphics core next. It's going to be more compute based, but still is going to have pretty robust graphics features. There's going to be some kind of, I believe I saw numbers of 32 compute units for a total of 2,048. I guess you'd call them shader units. I don't know. Ryan would speak up, but he has to bite tongue. Not a word can be said. But anyway, those are the basic numbers. They've got a 384-bit memory bus, so we're going to see some pretty hefty numbers in terms of bandwidth. It's going up to 5.5 gigahertz in memory transfers. So, you're looking 250, 300 gigabytes per second of throughput, which is just a stinking boatload. Now, the lower versions of the Pitcairn, they're all based on the older VLI W4. Going to be 256-bit bus. They're going to look a lot like the current 6900 series, but a little bit more efficient. And we'll see what all happens with that. They all should be 28 nanometer parts. So AMD is beating NVIDIA to the punch with this next generation of graphics, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see, because I've heard rumors of a couple of new features and things that put AMD more on a parity level in terms of features with NVIDIA, because say like for NVIDIA, you've got your SLI surround gaming, and you also have 3D the true shutter glasses 3D support for triple monitor gaming. And it seems like AMD is that's going to be their push now, is to have better Eyefinity type support, going to have better 3D support with the shutter glasses. So it's going to be interesting to see. I hope that everything goes out well for him. Again, this is kind of a mirror of what happened a couple years ago when AMD was the first out with 40 nanometer products. Had the first DirectX 11 products out the door, and they had significant lead on NVIDIA. Now with this, I don't think they're going to have nearly as great a lead, but they're still going to be they're going to be pitching the first products, and they could be gaining some good mind share from what they're doing. Now we don't know anything about how production with 28 nanometer is going. I've heard things both ways, like it's going fine, and in other words, it's some folks are saying it's not so good. They just don't have enough wafers going through, and not enough wafer starts. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the demand is like and what supply is going to be able to handle at that time. So that's all.
Have you heard any rumors about PCI Express 3.0?
These probably all should be PCI Express 3.0 compliant.
We're hoping.
Both from AMD and NVIDIA. I mean, the spec is well known. We're going to have products out there, namely on the Intel
Question
side.
is,
Yeah.
But will it matter, though? I mean, cards today don't really saturate PCI Express 2.0 in any stretch, right? So,
well, the only times we ever see that is with more of the triple monitor gaming with either SLI or Crossfire. They have seen some jumps in performance when going to a PCI Express 3.0 over PCI Express 2.0. But in most applications, you're not going to see a whole lot of difference. But if there's a lot of communication between the cards over the bus and not just with the over the top connector, then we could see some significant or at least measurable differences between the two technologies.
What about on the storage? Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Just and going into this as well, one of the other thoughts that I've got is all of this excess available bandwidth. We are starting to see, on multiple 30-inch monitors that, my God, you really do need to look at, dual GPU systems that are sitting on at least an 8x, if not a 16x, which is really hard to do right now. What about triple monitor gaming on 120 megahertz or hertz monitors, 3D gaming? All of a sudden now, you're looking at gobs and gobs of bandwidth needed to display, on 3 monitors in 3D. Is this sort of going to open up 3D gaming a little bit more?
It might. I hope so. I was also wondering, like Alan, on the storage side of things, could we use PCI Express 3.0 yet, or is it again going to be kind of one of those future-proofing type of things?
At the moment, and at least for like a year or two, it's going to be future-proofing because nobody's going to have the PHY to actually do the interfacing between whatever whatever SSD tech is on the other side of that chip. You have to have some physical chip that's going to bridge that over to PCI Express 3. So the way I picture all this right now is it's basically like draft N, right? It's like draft. There's supposedly
PCI
a spec, but nobody's really, nobody can say for sure if they're actually right per the spec or not, or maybe they are, and even if they are, then there's no card, so you can't test it, and, it's one of those things like it's already pretty darn quick, especially since you could just make let's say a SSD manufacturer right now wanted to make something PCIe 3. Why would they do that? They wouldn't, because nobody's making like a by 16 PCI Express 2 product yet, right? So why double the speed of the lanes that you have to move up to PCI Express 3, spend all that extra money on making that PHY, that interface chip, when you could really just, pair a couple of PHYs together and say you had an 8-lane PHY, right? You'd pair that with another one. Now you'd have 16 lanes, right? Because we still have more lanes than we're actually using for that sort of stuff.
Gotcha.
At least for the moment, right? It's just it's really dang fast, right? I mean, look at what we got with the R4. I think it was doing 3 gigabytes per second, right? And it was only using 8 lanes. Well, sure, yeah, but you could double that with double the number of lanes. Sure.
Fair enough. There was another SSD release this week. The OCZ technology, Petrol SATA 6 gigabit per second SSD. What is this SSD besides poorly named, Alan?
Okay. Name aside, I see this as a potential seriously big deal. Bigger than everybody might think here. Okay.
Oh no, I'm thinking it's big because it looks cheap and fast.
Here's the thing. So for pricing, let's throw a price out there. Okay, starting price MSRP, 128 gig, $150. Okay, so that's like a little bit over $1 a gig. That's already pretty low, right? I have it on good authority that there may or may not be sales at some websites around Christmas, and oh God, am I hoping this is true, that same model, 128 gig, should be a lot closer to $100, maybe less. Okay?
Oh,
So you're
Hynix, we love you. We love you.
We love you long time.
So you're talking less than $1 a gig. This combined with all the hard drive stuff going on right now, there's no excuse not to put a solid state drive in your system. Now, with that, this is not blazing fast solid state drive. Okay, this thing is not and when you when you put it up against probably any other decent SSD out there, the speeds are not going to be, I've already been forewarned. They're like, look, it's not going to beat anything else really, but it will definitely beat hard drives, right? For sure, that's absolutely going to happen.
Yeah, they're saying about 535 megs a second read, 400 megs write, and that's pretty much straight up, no matter how big you get it, including the terabyte.
But where the Achilles heel of it is going to be like the random type performance, especially random writes, and it might even be. I mean, the numbers are on the high side, but it might sort of be like if you're a really power user and you're doing a lot with this drive, it might get into sort of stuttery kind of territory. When IOs per second get that low, when they get into just a couple of thousand, since solid state drives work differently than hard drives do. Granted, hard drives get much lower IOs per second on random writes, but they do a lot of different tricks with how the buffer works and everything else on that solid state tends to not do. Right, so that's where you actually get that little stuttery kind of thing, like your mouse might hiccup, that sort of thing. Hopefully this won't be that bad, but it is, the performance is on the low end for solid state. But honestly,
to
at
clarify
those prices,
that, it's on the low end for solid state SATA 6 drives.
the IOs per second are even low for SATA 3 drives. Really, you get
so
SATA 3
I've
drives
got
that
the
have
first generation Samsung in mind. Would I see a significant improvement by going with this?
This would probably be a little bit lower than random writes on Samsung. Probably. Especially for, if you look at just 128 gig drive, its write speed is actually lower than your first generation Samsung. That's your 3 gigabit per second Samsung, correct, Josh?
Yeah.
The one you have? Yeah. So this is actually slower on even sequential writes. Not horribly slower, but it is slower. And random writes, it's probably going to be neck to neck or maybe even a little bit slower than that generation Samsung. So to put that in that sort of perspective. But it's really, really cheap, right? And the random read performance is good. It's around decent serial 3 gigabit per second type performance. So I did a little digging on this, and the lower end drives, I believe, are not going to be Intel or Toshiba or Samsung Flash. They're going to be Hynix, which we usually see Hynix chips as, is it Hynix or Hynix? I can't remember. Hynix. Yeah. Those are the guys that usually make the small cache RAM chip on all these drives. Like a lot of the time we take our internal pictures for the reviews and you'll see there's a little Hynix chip on there just for the cache. Well, they make flash memory. They have for a while. It's supposedly pretty decent, but the catch is that it doesn't use either of the standards, I believe, as far as how it interfaces with the controller. So OCZ, if they do incorporate this, or if that's how they did this, they would have had to come up with their own special tricks for this for the controller to handle this flash memory properly, which would put them ahead of everybody else. I mean, if all that's true, if you can't just plug these things right in and have them work on anybody else's controller, you're not going to see anyone else copy this sort of thing for a little while.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is this is
I mean,
this might be
the
it,
ASIC
right?
for these controllers is going to be relatively cheap. I mean, the technology inside of it is, the design is the most expensive part. But I mean, if they can fab these things out, no problem. Run it at a slightly lower spec. It's a great deal for consumers like me and for Ken, who I'd like to mention is nicely oiled up for this evening.
And begging for SSDs.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is the thing, guys. I think this is what starts that thing we've been hoping would happen,
That
and people
slippery
would really
slope
start.
down into
That's-
more
yeah, that
affordable
slippery slope.
SSDs.
Because think about it wasn't too many years back where hard drives just passed the dollar per gig barrier, right? And if this can do that and stay there, what I'm really hoping doesn't happen is that the sales go through the roof and Newegg has to jack their prices up just to keep them on the shelf, right?
It's
Which
happened
does happen.
before.
It's happened before. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But even that, if the price starts out low and even works its way back up to the MSRP, it's still a good deal. Really good deal. So here's hoping. Let's all cross our fingers and hope that thing comes out.
Cool. What else we got on the list? AMD released, I don't know why they did this. They released two different versions of Catalyst drivers on the same day. They released 11.12, which is the kind of inline, what we expected release for December, the 12th
The
month of the year,
WHQL
11.12.
version.
Right. And then they
Legal.
released a preview version of 12.1, right? So what is, the difference is 11.12 is a WHQL version. It includes Eyefinity technology enhancements, including HD 3D technology when using 3x1 landscape Eyefinity display groups. So this is basically, they have implemented retroactively support for basically 3D Vision Surround, but on AMD platforms. So AMD HD 3D plus Eyefinity.
It doesn't have
Catalyst-
the 1111C performance patch on it.
It does not. Okay.
No, that's sort of the biggest thing between the 1112 and the 12.1 is that the 12.1 actually includes everything that was put in C. You still get the improvements in A and B, and as you'd mentioned, a little bit extra.
Does 12.1 have HD 3D Eyefinity support?
It does indeed.
Okay,
And it'll
so-
even do stereo 3D over HDMI 1.4a.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting. You can do 1080p at 30 hertz
Mm-hmm.
3D mode, which is actually an improvement over even what NVIDIA does. I think NVIDIA's is limited to 24 hertz. So the only reason you would install 11.12 instead of 12.1 is if you need a WHQL driver instead of just willing to install any other random driver, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, it's AMD is even puts in the notes, they recommend any gamers go to the 12.1 preview. Just do it.
10% more performance in Elder Scrolls Skyrim when using multi-sample anti-aliasing.
Which
Maybe
is the
one day I'll
default
actually buy
anti-aliasing in the game.
All right. What's that, Josh?
One other thing that they put in was the ability to create more Crossfire profiles and to adjust current ones to better match what you have and what you like. So that's a nice little bit of flexibility that they've.
So you can
included
manually
in the
create
driver.
profiles that you used to have to wait for updates for the Catalyst DAP.
Supposedly, I haven't actually tested this out or been able to load anything up and see, but that was one of the bullet points of this particular release.
All right. I guess we should have brought in Alan here for this one too. Intel says they're scaling. Well, this is everybody's discussion. Intel is apparently scaling back its outlook for the entire quarter now, or the entire rest of the year, based on the hard drive shortage. What's the number here? They've scaled it back
20% or something.
from
No.
14.7 billion to 13
$1 billion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
They're expecting $1 billion less revenue because of the hard drive shortage.
And guess what? They're not the only ones. Anybody making PCs, right? Lenovo, Dell, HP. Anybody that's making it. What do you need in a PC? Hard drive, right?
Right.
So everything has to be scaled back on account of this.
Damn you,
Trickling back
floods.
to what, trickling back to or rolling back on what we talked about before. who knows? You might see them make their SSD prices cheaper, like when you add an SSD when you're going to buy your
what's
laptop
kind
or
of
whatever.
interesting about this? Old Rory
What?
Reed from AMD said it's going to have, a pretty much immaterial effect on us because, and read between the lines, we can't actually supply the demand that is given to our products. So they're still selling everything they can, and they're not affected by this drive shortage because,
Oh, damn.
Nice.
yeah.
Then again, you
Good
kind of
news.
wonder if they're protesting a bit too much. Because, I mean, you've got Digitimes that was looking into it, and all they're doing is predicting about a 5% difference between supply and demand by middle of next
It's about
year.
pricing. Oh! I see. In terms of product availability.
As terms in product availability, they're expecting that by the middle of next year, you're going to see, about a 5% difference between the actual what's produced and what's demanded. In the short term, yeah, it's approaching 20%, but it shouldn't last throughout the year. Except the problem is that, okay, the hard drives are suddenly flooding in come quarter 3. It's going to take until quarter 4 before you can get them ordered in a factory, assembled onto a floor somewhere, and try to be sold. So the final quarter of next year could be a huge seller because people are desperate for PCs. And it's going to be interesting if, refreshes from both companies are all of a sudden going to be seeing, sales they haven't really seen in a long time.
So do you
Gotcha.
think a lot of the hard drive manufacturers got together and formed a plan to flood Thailand to
No, I just
increase
think
the price of their current products because they've gone so incredibly cheap?
Well, it's a very long-term process. About 50, 60 years ago, they started deforesting the northern Thailand to try and get rid of the ground soil so that they could predict by about 2012. They were off for a year, but that was the actual Mayan end of the world prediction, was the shortage of hard drives everywhere.
That makes so much more sense now.
And if you buy that, I
The
just think
world
these
coincides
guys
with the
are
lack of porn. So many things fall into line when you don't have just free hard drive space.
the coming of the cloud, so you don't have to buy a hard drive. You just rent space.
Well, somebody has to buy hard drives.
Those
Amazon
torrenting
still has to buy
sites are
hard
going
drives.
to take huge traffic hits. They're just not going to be able to torrent as much stuff. They don't have any room to store it.
I'm gonna have to stream all that now.
Yeah.
Damn.
This does,
That's the
we
worst.
haven't
So
addressed.
who was
we
in
haven't
on it
addressed
too?
yet. This actually, in a very roundabout way, impacts the adoption or advancement, you want to call it, of cloud-based storage, right?
Oh,
'Cause
absolutely,
those,
it does.
those companies have
Those
to buy
companies
the
that-
disks.
They're all built on basically free hard drive space. You look at what Dropbox does, Amazon EC2, all those pricing schemes are all based on the fact that not only could they get cheap hard drives today, but they're expecting to get cheaper hard drives tomorrow, not inverse. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean,
they
yeah.
have to expand, right? As people are signing up for the service, as people are actually trying to move. There's a difference between just getting an account on some cloud-based thing and actually starting to use that and fill that space, right?
Look at what Apple is doing with their iCloud, Amazon Music, Google Music, all those types of things, where maybe now Google, instead of saying 50,000 songs, they say, maybe you get 24 songs. Maybe that's all you get.
just
maybe
24.
24 is enough, right? You get one full playlist. Add to it and remove it as you need to. Sorry.
I think it just speaks to the industry recovering a lot quicker than a lot of we speculated at the beginning, because it's really hard to clean up a clean room, and I think they've just done a stellar job of getting things back up and running.
Let's see what else was cool this week. Apple may bring high pixel density displays to MacBook Pro notebooks. So this is actually pretty cool. We often talk about on this podcast that the technology that seems to fall the furthest behind is display technology. Everybody is still using 20-inch monitors or less. Very, maybe fewer people are using 1080p displays than we even would realize. I think everybody in the world should have a 30-inch display because I think they're awesome, but I realize that they can't afford it. Part of that reason is we just haven't seen these display companies really push forward. So Apple had a 30-inch display. Apparently they don't have that anymore. They only have a 27-inch display. But apparently they're going to try to do the high pixel density thing that they did with the iPhone 4 and on the MacBook Pro. They're talking about a 13-inch MacBook Pro, instead of it being saddled with a 1280 by 800 resolution, that maybe the next 13-inch display will have a 2880 by 1800 resolution, which gives it a pixels per inch rating of 261 or so.
Which is also the equivalent of like a 34-inch desktop display at 72 pixels per inch. That's more resolution than a 30-inch.
Yes. Now, obviously, they won't make those icons scaled correctly. Otherwise, you would never be able to see anything on a 13-inch display at the same kind of like aspect, or not aspect ratio, but relative
DPI.
size. Yeah. So
You know what this will
It's-
do, though? It'll do a
What's
number
that?
on you if you're trying to boot camp and run Windows.
that's true.
Windows
Their
does not
operating
have
system
that
isn't built for
particular
that.
support.
When Windows 7 does have that little slider, and you can say what your pixels per inch and is and stuff like that.
yeah,
but
that's true.
It's not perfect by any means. It
No.
doesn't.
It doesn't
you know,
scale correctly.
Yeah, it's never really worked right. It was an improvement, but it's never really been where it needed to be, and obviously was not made with this kind of a display in mind, where you actually have greater than 72 pixels per inch. They just made it really
Yes.
for people with bad vision, and they want their stuff bigger, right?
I
But
did get
yeah,
to see a 4K display this past week, which was really, really, really impressive. 4096 by 2180 resolution on the 36-inch screen, I guess. It was basically
Nice.
a high-grade medical device. It required two DVI input, two dual-link DVI inputs, or two DisplayPort inputs to power all those pixels. And it was impressive to see in person. Plus, I had a
like-
little
it's
picture
like
of
quad
the Windows
DVI.
slider bar going to 4160 by 2180, which is nice. And don't expect. I think this one was priced at about $10,000, so I don't think I'll be getting one of those in for testing, which is disappointing to say the least.
This is kind of interesting, though. If you just think about this kind of display in general, you
Mhm.
almost don't need anti-aliasing.
Well,
I mean,
for text and stuff, sure, but for gaming, unless
You're-
for
you're
3D
not gonna
rendering
see
in general,
jaggies.
unless you have to be able to actually
Okay.
have enough horsepower
I
to
actually
publish it.
kind of
That
have a answer for this.
Yeah.
At desktop resolutions, well, well, not resolutions, but say I'm sitting, 2 feet away from my 24-inch monitor. The resolution needs to be in that about, I think it was at 4,000 by 3,000 to so that you wouldn't be able to see any kind of aliasing. That's about the highest you can pick up, with the human eye.
okay.
Or I think it was like a 21-inch screen. The last time I heard it was like 4,000 by 4,000, pixels in a 21-inch screen. So even this monitor, as dense as it is, still does not approach what the human visual perception is when you start dealing about, the absolute smallest pixel that you can discern and be able to see jaggies and whatnot. So we're still a little ways away.
and this is gonna be
from
on a
that.
13-inch screen. I mean,
well, okay, but
I
take-
applaud the
take this
movement,
for-
but go ahead.
Take this for a fact, though. You won't have to use the same degree of anti-aliasing, right? With this display versus something that was 72 pixels per inch to get a similar kind of, smoothness or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Which is good, right? Because this thing is not going to have that much horsepower where it's trying to drive all those pixels.
Right.
So it's a good thing that you don't need to do that much of that, right? Because you're going to want to use all that horsepower to drive,
Well,
what's equivalent to
I
like a
guess it
dual-link
depends what we're
DVI
talking about,
display.
right? Because gaming is different than your standard text display. If you look at graphics hardware, Josh, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty much been designed at this point where anti-aliasing is free in terms of performance to a certain degree. That's how the memory architectures have been built. Whereas increasing the pixel count is not free in terms of processing power.
I think that is a correct assessment of the situation.
Yeah. So I think for gaming, that's not the case. Trust me, I would love to have more pixels. I love this. And if you're NVIDIA, if you're AMD's graphics team, you love this as well because anything that demands more GPU horsepower, they are for because it would mean people would have to buy better graphics cards and they could design better graphics cards and sell them for higher prices. But either way, like even though I don't own an iPhone, I love to see the advancements in display technology that they did on the iPhone 4, and if this turns out to be true, that they're doing here, and I hope that will push other people along to do that because I'm sick and tired of 1080p being the last resolution anybody ever needs, and I hate that there are people that believe that is the case. Essentially, whether we're talking about a TV,
about a couple of weeks ago
display.
how the next big jump is going to be the display technologies. I mean, we've kind of hit, where we're at with the graphics and video, and we are really truly being held back by the displays that we are looking at right now. So, yeah, I think in the next 10 years we're going to see a quantum leap. I mean, just like 2000, you can get a CRT that can do 1080i, and that was top of the line. And now you can get a $100 1080p desktop monitor, and quality is there. So yeah, it's going to be some big jumps in the next 10 years, and guys like NVIDIA and AMD are really going to be pushing it because they need to continue to sell products that will push the envelope and make people pay big money to do that.
All right, let's get to a couple of voicemails. I don't know if we have these queued up. If we are ready to go, we do have two. So I think I've mumbled quite long enough to see if we get these playing. So let's hear our first question.
Hey guys, just a quick question about 3D and 3D graphics. I'm really considering buying a 3D monitor after the beginning of the year, and was just wondering what your take is on, do you need to have a special graphics card to run 3D games? What games currently run 3D on the PC, if any? Just what are your thoughts about 3D gaming on a PC? Thanks.
All righty. So I think most of us have at least seen the 3D gaming technologies that NVIDIA and AMD both have. You do not need to have a special graphics card to run 3D. If you have any Radeon 5000, 4000, I think 4000, 5000, 6000 card, you'll be able to do 3D gaming. If you have an NVIDIA GTX 200 or 400 or 500, you'll be able to do 3D gaming. It all depends on what resolution you want to run at. The complication with 3D gaming is that you have to have a compatible display, and then you have to have enough GPU horsepower that you need, because like if you're running 1080p, you have to be able to run 2x the number of pixels that you'd normally have to run, right? So if you want to get 60 hertz in each eye, you have to be able to run 120 frames per second at that resolution for the effect to be the best it can be. This is an interesting topic because there's a lot of debate between NVIDIA and AMD on who's doing 3D better. NVIDIA has 3D Vision, which is a marketing program that they run that essentially, they brand 3D Vision for gaming, they brand 3D Vision for monitors. They talk about 3D Vision technology on their graphics cards, and it's unfortunately a mostly proprietary technology. So if you go out and you buy an Asus 27-inch 1080p 3D Vision display, it will not work with an AMD graphics card. It sucks, but that's the case. However, if you wanted to do 3D Vision, 3D technology with AMD, which they call AMD or HD 3D, then it's a little bit less obvious which displays work with their technology. You don't have an integrated 3D middleware software, which is what 3D Vision essentially is on the software side of things. On NVIDIA's side, you have to use another third-party piece of software called Triple D, which is not what Josh wishes it was, or IZ3D. These are kind of third-party middleware applications that sit between the game and the driver. As for what games do 3D, almost all games will do 3D of some kind. It's a matter of how perfected they are for the technology. So essentially, all a game, a middleware like 3D Vision which is embedded in NVIDIA's driver, or IZ3D that works on the AMD side of things. All it does is it basically renders the image slightly offset, and then alternates which eye sees those frames. The trick is like sometimes the crosshair on the screen isn't rendered at the correct depth. So NVIDIA's driver team knows to take the crosshair off of the screen when playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 or something like that. Those are the types of tweaks that are necessary to make for the optimal 3D experience. So it's pretty good that way. I actually really do enjoy the active shutter experience with 3D gaming. My dilemma is, if somebody has access to a lot of hardware, I would rather sit in front of a 2D 30-inch panel in game than I would sit in front of a single 1080p 3D display. And because I have access to both of those, I choose the 30-inch. However, I understand that a lot of people don't have access to $1,000 monitors. So the $500 3D Vision display from Asus, for example, the 27-inch, which is the largest screen, still has a 1080p resolution, but it's the largest 3D screen that I know of, other than projectors that Burke is showing on the screen as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a different way of doing it, though, because it's going to accept any 3D signal that comes over HDMI 1.4a specs.
Yep.
And it comes with
I forgot about that whole HDMI thing, because you can use those 3D projectors, or you can use any 3D TV that supports HDMI 1.4a input for 3D, and then you use whatever glasses, passive or active, comes with that display technology. So it's still kind of a mess in terms of what works with what. It's not really. I guess for NVIDIA, you either have if you have a monitor, you make sure you get a 3D Vision monitor. If you use a TV or a projector, you have to get their 3D TV Play software, which is offered on their website, which will allow you to output a 3D capable signal through your HDMI port. For AMD, it's the same way for the HDMI port. It's all kind of integrated in, and then you can go to the game.amd.com website and look for their HD 3D section. It'll tell you which monitors. So it still is not a technology that's caught on in a great way, but it's I still think it has potential. I really do. So, any other thoughts on 3D before we move on to? Did we get a second email, Burke? Do we have that the other email or voicemail? I'm sorry.
Voicemail.
Yeah.
Hey guys, my name is John from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Got a question about SSDs. I've got a SandForce 2 drive of some sorts by the store Micro Center. I'm told that it may be some kind of A data drive, 64 gigabyte SandForce 2. Wanted to take a jump on it. I tried it, and unfortunately, I find that when I use that as my boot drive, I experience this really bad kind of micro stuttering for games that are installed on it. And I wasn't sure if there was something with SandForce 2 or it's just that specific drive that is not really good for games. I took it out and I put my games on a regular Seagate 1 terabyte drive, and doesn't seem to have the same issues. So if you guys have any ideas, please give me a call. I'd love to hear. Thanks. Bye.
That's me. So the A data
that was me. That's you. There you go.
Well, that's yeah. That brand is not one of the better known SandForce rebrand type brands. I know that was a mouthful. I would try to check on their site, see if they have a firmware. That controller by itself should be just fine for pretty much anything you throw at it, even the 64 gig version that is not as fast as the higher capacity versions that use more channels to the flash and whatnot. So either you've got something physically wrong with that controller and there's just something up with it and some sort of defect, or it's a firmware thing and maybe they initially shipped with, just firmware that was too early. Now, those were the SandForces that did have the firmware issues that were reported on, but those resulted in blue screens, the drive timing out, that sort of thing. You might be experiencing some version of that. That's just the way it's presenting on your system. So I would fish around for a firmware. Uh, if you can't find it for that manufacturer, it's probably not going to come out. Like if it hasn't come out by now, because that whole bug
Yeah.
issue was like over a month old, right? So if you just got the drive, I hate to say it, but I'd probably try and return it and see if you can get an equivalent deal on same kind of, you go for the same SandForce, just go for a different brand. So check out our SSD decoder, the pcper.com/SSD. Look on there, find something else that's equivalent. Try to find something cheap. Holiday season's out. You might be able to get most of your money back, even if you just, if there's a firmware or if the drive's maybe just not performing the best for you think, and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, I would just sell it off and buy a bigger capacity of the same controller, because the larger capacities can handle more IOs per second, better performance, that sort of thing. That's the way I'd go for either one of those scenarios.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your voicemails, guys. 1-888-38-PC-PER is the telephone number, toll-free, U.S. and Canada, if you would like to send us a message. And, of course, podcast at pcper.com. We will get some more of your emails in the coming weeks as we approach the holiday season. Now let's get into our hardware software picks of the week, starting with myself. I didn't have a specific SKU in mind. However, I wanted to point out a quick anecdote. One of the machines, one of the working machines we have here in the office that we just use for random image editing and making content for the website, essentially, email and all that kind of stuff, is a Q6600 base system, a Core 2 quad. So it's a little bit older system. It's starting to show its age. And it has 4 gigs of DDR2 memory. Well, we had some issues with using Photoshop CS5 on it, and then having, you've got multiple browsers with multiple tabs, and we've got Yammer, and we've got all kinds of these other things open. And what we'd notice when we'd open up Photoshop, that it would slow down to this unbearable crawl, to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to build a new system for this and copy all the data over that we need over. But I really, don't like doing that whole process. Formatting all that kind of stuff is a pain in the ass. So I went ahead and I bit the bullet, and this was what the funny part was, is I actually went on Amazon and I purchased DDR2 memory because I couldn't find 2 gigabyte DDR2 memory anywhere in my office. So I ordered 2 more 2 gigabyte modules from Amazon. I think it cost me $40. Installed it in the system, had to downclock from DDR2 800 to DDR2 667 because of some instability issues with these mismatched pairs of modules. However, now I'm able to run all the applications I wanted to. No problem. Open up, a dozen different and I wanted to point this out to people who may be struggling with their system. Try that memory upgrade first. I still think it's one of the cheapest, easiest, quickest litmus tests to see if your system needs to be completely overhauled and upgraded. Whether or not it's for gaming, general use, or if you've got a lot of stuff open in the background before you start gaming and you don't want to have to close it all and reopen it and that kind of stuff, give that a look. And like I said, I felt kind of weird as a high-tech journalist as we are here and dealing with Sandy Bridge E processors with systems with 32 gigs of memory. Here I was ordering 2 gigabyte DDR2 800 megahertz modules on Amazon, but it worked out. Now we've got a workstation that is still completely 100% usable into the 2012 year. So long live my Q6600 in the other room. Josh or Jeremy, what do you got?
Well, first, I can't believe that I have not thought of duct taping an air horn to a wall directly behind a door that opens and will smash into the air horn. It'd be a great server room alarm. But the hardware pick is really the 3930K. Even before I'd seen a lot of reviews come out for it, because originally, it's the 3960 Extreme that was coming out as the high-end $99 or $999 processor from Intel that we haven't seen in over a year. We want the flagship processor. We want to see just what these guys can do. This time, it was sort of meh. It didn't bite on me like the 3930K. Maybe it's that Intel's unlocking just about everything instead of just the extremes. Maybe it's just that, instead of being about $800, the medium one was $600 instead of $1,000. So I put the 3930K on the leaderboard, and I stand by it. There is still a link to the 3960 Extreme if you do, want to have the bragging rights for it. But as you saw in Ryan's review, really, there's just not that much difference from it. This is probably the next i7 920. At least until the motherboards run out, because this socket ain't going to last long outside of the server world. Josh?
Me. Well, I think you all know my tastes in computer games, and one that has certainly entranced me has been Defense Grid. And I originally bought that for $5, and I did the DLCs for 99 cents a piece. Well, they came out with a new DLC called You Monster. And
say it right.
You Monster. That it? Basically,
Well, you can't really
it
do
takes
her
the Portal 2, world, and applies it to Defense Grid. And you've got GLaDOS talking to you and making fun of you and doing all kinds of really interesting things with your simulations. I've played a couple of maps. They're a lot of fun. It's the most games I've played in the last couple of weeks. $5. Hours and hours of enjoyment. And you get to relive the Portal 2 experience in a small amount. So, I think it is well worth your time, especially if you like Defense Tower type games.
Alan, last on the list, but not in our hearts.
Last but not least, and I guess this is my pick for the next 2 weeks, since next week I have to bow out. Yeah, cheap SSDs, they're out. Buy yourself a Christmas present. Seriously. Don't buy a hard drive. At least
Do you
not
have a
for your
specific
operating
one,
system.
or are you just saying in general?
Look for the good deals. I'm going to be looking for good deals and posting up news as I see it, as the whole holiday rush thing comes up. So, just do it. Especially if that petrol hits the shelves, hopefully in time for the holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah, heck, even if it's after Christmas shopping.
You
That would be
deserve
cool.
it for dinner with your family.
Well, not me, but, you.
No, that's
listeners.
me.
No, I meant the global you, the royal
Yes.
you.
Yes. Nobody
Right.
should have to endure running their operating system on a spinning disk. Sorry to say it. Big stuff, put it on the spinning disk. That's fine. But OS,
Fair enough.
SSD.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap up the show for us this week. Again, that toll-free number is 1-888-38-PC-PER. Podcast at pcper.com is the email address. Please share our show with your friends. pcper.com/podcast is the URL to give them for all of your computer hardware love. And then, of course, the normal places, twitter.com/pcper, facebook.com/pcper, and gplus.to/pcper. Those are the places where you can follow us, friend us, make us feel better about ourselves, but then also get the latest news and reviews as they go live in a semi sort of real-time manner, which is better than I can say for most of our other editors and writers and that kind of stuff. So that's going to be it for this week. We will be back next week, I believe. Yes, we have at least one more episode before all the holidays kick us in the ass. But we'll have hardware news for you then. So looking forward to it. For this week, though, I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
He got his full name correct this time. That's great news, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Her.